The Upanishads in two parts, part 2, translated by Max Muller. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 6th Adhyaya, 3rd Brahmana. If a man wishes to reach greatness from performing sacrifices, he performs the Upanishad rule during 12 days, i.e., he lives on small quantities of milk, beginning on an auspicious day of the light half of the moon, during the northern progress of the sun, collecting at the same time in a cup or a dish made of udumbara wood all sorts of herbs, including fruits. He sweeps the floor near the house altar of a sadhya, sprinkles it, lays the fire, spreads grass round it, according to rule, prepares the clarified butter, akya, and on a day presided over by a male star, nakshatra, after having properly mixed the mantha, the herbs, fruits, milk, honey, and so on, he sacrifices. He pours akya into the fire, saying, O Gatavedas, whatever adverse entities there are in thee, who defeat the desires of men, to them I offer this portion. May they, being pleased, please me with all desires. Svaha. That cross deity who lies down, thinking that all things are kept asunder by her. I worship thee as perpetuous with this stream of ghee. Svaha. Then he says, Svaha to the first, Svaha to the best, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to breath, Svaha to her who is the richest, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to speech, Svaha to the support, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to the eye, Svaha to success, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to the ear, Svaha to the home, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to the mind, Svaha to offspring, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to seed, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to Agni, fire, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to Soma, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Bu, earth, Svaha, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Bhuva, sky, Svaha, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svah, heaven, Svaha, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Bur, Buvah, Svah, Svaha, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to Brahman, the priesthood, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to Kshatriya, the knighthood, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says, Svaha to the past, pours ghee into the fire, and throws what remains into the mantha mortar. He then says Svaha to the future, pours ghee into the fire and throws what remains into the mantha, mortar. He then says Svaha to the universe, pours ghee into the fire and throws what remains into the mantha, mortar. He then says Svaha to all things, pours ghee into the fire and throws what remains into the mantha, mortar. He then says Svaha to Pragapate, pours ghee into the fire and throws what remains into the mantha, mortar. He then touches it, the mantha, which is dedicated to prana, breath, saying, Thou art fleet as breath, thou art burning as fire, thou art full as Brahman, thou art firm as the sky, thou art the abode of all as the earth. Thou hast been saluted with hin at the beginning of the sacrifice by the prastotra. Thou art saluted with hin in the middle of the sacrifice by the prastotra. Thou hast been sung by the udgatra at the beginning of the sacrifice. Thou art sung by the udgatra in the middle of the sacrifice. Thou hast been celebrated by the advaryu at the beginning of the sacrifice. Thou art celebrated again by the agnithra in the middle of the sacrifice. Thou art bright in the wet cloud. Thou art great. Thou art powerful. Thou art food as Sama. Thou art light as Agni, fire, the heater. Thou art the end. Thou art the absorption of all things. Then he holds it, the metta, forth, saying, Thou knowest all. We know thy greatness. He is indeed a king, a ruler, the highest lord. May that king, that ruler, make me the highest lord. Then he eats it, saying, Tat Savatur Verenyam. We meditate on that adorable light. The wind drops honey for the righteous. The rivers drop honey. May our plants be sweet as honey. Buh. Svaha. Bargo Devasya Dhimahe. Of the divine Savitra. May the night be honey in the morning. May the air above the earth be heaven. Our Father be honey. Buvah. Svaha. Deyo Yonah Prokodeyat. Who should rouse our thoughts? May the tree be full of honey. May the sun be full of honey. May our cows be sweet like honey. Svah. Svaha. He repeats the whole Savitri verse and all the verses about the honey, thinking, May I be all this. Bur. Buvah. Svah. Svaha. Having thus swallowed all, he washes his hands and sits down behind the altar, turning his head to the east. In the morning he worships Aditya, the sun, with the hymn, Thou art the best lotus of the 4 quarters. May I become the best lotus among men. Then returning as he came, he sits down behind the altar and recites the genealogical list. Udalaka Aruna told this, Manta doctrine, to his people, Vagasanaya, Yagnavalkya, and said, If a man were to pour it on a dry stick, branches would grow, and leaves spring forth. Vagasanaya, Yagnavalkya, told the same to his people. Mavuka Ingya, and said, If a man were to pour it on a dry stick, branches would grow and leaves spring forth. Madhuka Paingya told the same to his people. Kula Ba Gavita, and said, If a man were to pour it on a dry stick, branches would grow, and leaves spring forth. Kula Bhagavata told the same to his people, Ganaka Agasthuna, and said, if a man were to pour it on a dry stick, branches would grow, and leaves spring forth. Ganaka Agasthuna told the same to his people, Satyakama Gabala, and said, if a man were to pour it on a dry stick, branches would grow, and leaves spring forth. Satyakama Gabala told the same to his peoples, and said, if a man were to pour it on a dry stick, branches would grow, and leaves spring forth. Spring forth. Let no people tell this to anyone except to a son or to a people. 4 things are made of the wood of the Udumbara tree: the sacrificial ladle, Surva, the cup, Kamasa, the fuel, and the 2 churning sticks. There are 10 kinds of village cultivated seeds, these rice and barley, Brihiyavas, sesamum and kidney beans, Tela Bashas, millet and panic seed, Anu Briyantavas, wheat, Gothumas, lentils, Masuras, pulse, Kalvas, and vetches, Kalakulas. After having ground these, he sprinkles them with curds, Dade, honey, and ghee, and then offers the proper portions of clarified butter, Akya. And this verse 13, according to the rules laid down in the proper Grihya Sutras. You know, you just don't burn butter, you know. And Kala Kulas. Max Muller's given what he thinks to be the best. He's given the English names after Rower, who living in India had the best opportunity of identifying the various kinds of plants here mentioned. The commentators do not help us much. Sankara says that in some places, Priyangu, panic seed, or millet, is called Kangu. That Kalva, pulse, is called Nishpava and Vala. And Kalakula, vetches, commonly called Kulatta. Vedaganga adds that Anu is called in Gujarat, Muria, Priyangu, Kangu, Kalva as Nishpava, Vala, and Kalakula, Kulatta. And in verse 12, we have, don't tell this to anyone except the pupil, the Mantha doctrine with the Prana Darsana. It probably means no one except one's own son and to one's own disciple. And the genealogical list probably refers to the list immediately following the last Brahmana of this Adhyaya, perhaps. The Rig Veda 3:62:10 is, a little bit different than the Om Bhurabhuva Svaha Tafsavato Varaniyam Bhago Devasya Tinmahe Oyona Prachodayat. So I guess there's a couple versions of that, right? And in verse 5, thou knowest all these curious words, a mamse, mamhe, te mahe, are not explained by Sankara. Anandagiri explains them as I have translated them. They correspond to Ammo namase ammahe ta sarvam midam in the Kandogi Upanishad 5.2.6.6. The Madhyandinas read Amma se amamhe maye sahe raga, and so on. The Vivedaganga translates, "Thou art the knower, thy knowledge extends to me." And, well, I'm reminded of the Gnostic Mass of Aleister Crowley. There is no part of me that is not of the gods. Well, you don't have to think of things as the, I said the God because I didn't think that the plurality or the gender stuff was necessary. But then again, you're like the tarot cards. It's like you're really, every card refers to you. It refers to the external universe. It refers to spiritual beings of the different classes. The other two create, so you don't have to, oh, well, you are this. So whichever of the male and female entities that one is referring to, that's, and yes, I know there's things here also that I wouldn't, the mantha in verse 1, we have dravya, prakshipta, mathita, saktava is the explanation of mantha given in NMV page 406, and some verses absent in the Kandoka Upanishad 5.2.6.4. About the this, read Nipadyasa. Okay, who lies down in verse 4, sacrifices into the fire, saying, according to the rule, as the whole act is considered smarta, not srauta, in order to be observed. Avrit is that of Sathalikata, and the Madhyandina text has this Brahmana in page 1103, the Kandoka Upanishad 5.2.4-8, Koshitaka Upanishad 2.3, and during the 12 days, Yasman Punya Nukule Anya Karma Kirshate Tata Prak Punya Ham Eva Rabya Devadasaham Upasadvrata. And so Yule in some calendars was celebrated as a 12-day rite, which very conspicuously bridges the gap between Christmas and New Year's in the Christian calendar, and that's a very interesting reason why they put it there. You could also say if you celebrate Christmas and then the 8th day of life, But Yule is sometimes not the same day in December. The cross-quarter night and then the day would be the traditional way of doing that. But this thing again, Yasmen punye anukule ane karma ke kirshate tata prak punyaham avarabhya Dvadasaham upasan vrati.